Hi everyone, by the way, attendees, thank you so much for joining us in the past 7 days. I know you've been going through a lot of resources on a daily basis, and I know Tanya has been coordinating some quiz questions that we had made for you on a daily basis. You had feedback forms, so I'm really looking forward to looking at all of that data. Some of it was also sent to you after the completion of this. So do please fill it up. How your experience was in the past 7 day short course on smart protein sector would really help us understand how do we engage with universities a little better and kind of help engage and inspire young talent. I'm myself a food technologist by education. I'll tell you a little bit more when we get started. But certainly, I'm not super old in that sense, right? I've been just graduated like a few years ago. I kind of understand where you guys are coming from, the career opportunities you're thinking about, research opportunities you're thinking about, and just to tell you about this huge sector that is being building globally, which has positive implications on the planet, on people, on animal, on health, on sustainability, on climate change, a lot of these things. So thank you so much again for joining, and looking forward to talking with you all soon. I think Tanya is also here, so maybe I'll get started with the recording, Tanya, now, and then you can take over the introductions.
Yes,
Perfect. I'm starting in one, two, and three.
I hope I'm audible. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Tanya Arora, President of Environment Club DYAL Singh College. And on the behalf of Eco Club, I welcome all the esteemed panelists of the day from Good Food Institute India, Mr. Shardul Dabir and Mr. Akshay Vishnu Bhat. The past week has been great with superb resources provided by Good Food Institute India. We all learned about the smart protein sector from scratch and answered the hows, whats, and whys of the sector. To those questions which remained unanswered, we have this live session today with our panelists. So, I introduce our first panelist of the day, Mr. Shardul Dabir, who is an innovation specialist at GFI India to accelerate early stage innovation ecosystem for the smart protein sector and enable GFI India's team of experts in shaping the future of food efficiently, effectively, and sustainably. Over the past 8 years, he has studied food through the fields of engineering, applied sciences, research and development, entrepreneurship, management, and highly complementary liberal arts. He is a Young India Fellow from Ashoka University and holds a bachelor's in food technology and management from NIFTEN, MOFPI, Government of India. He has spent time as a researcher at Rutgers University, USA, and University of Saskatchewan, Canada, if the pronunciation is correct. And our second panelist of the day is Mr. Akshay Vishnu Bhat, who is a science and technology specialist in cultivated meat at the Good Food Institute, India. With a deeply scientific background, Mr. Akshay holds a BSc in biotechnology from Bangalore University, a master's in medical biochemistry, and a PhD in cancer and muscle biology from the National University of Singapore. He was most recently a founder of Falcon Bio, a cancer drug delivery and services platform based out of Singapore. Akshay is an accomplished scientist and an entrepreneur with 7 years of experience in the translational and cross functional research and development projects with a focus on commercialization. So, without further ado, I will hand over the session to Mr. Shardul and let's commence the today's session.
Thank you so much, Tanya. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful organization of the 7 day course by the Eco Club. And thank you so much for reaching out to us. As a central body which is building this sector in India for the past 3 years, the Good Food Institute has been engaging with universities because time and again, we work with a lot of stakeholders. So everybody who's attending today, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. And for that, I have a presentation deck. So let me quickly share that one with you as well. I think you're able to see my screen and I'll present this up. So really coming on to the first slide, the main question that we are really driven by is how do we feed 10 billion people by the year 2050? Our population is going to be 20 by 10 billion people by 2050. It's going to be 9.7, 9.8 billion. And how do we do that efficiently, effectively, and sustainably? And how do we specifically do it through the solution, which is the smart protein sector, which is our main goal of, kind of working towards. And my name is obviously Shardul Dabir. I work as an innovation specialist. That means I work with entrepreneurs, investors, startups, companies, accelerators, incubators, universities, young students, and early stage research professionals, non-sci-tech professionals as well, to kind of build this sector from the very grounds up. And obviously, Tanya introduced my colleague, Dr. Akshay Bhat, who's a SciTech specialist at GFI India, and his expertise in cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy. And he'll talk a little bit about the cultivated vertical as well. So you might be thinking, after going through these resources, at some places we call it the alternative protein sector. At some places we call it the smart protein sector. In India, we call it the smart protein sector because we have a mission for smart protein. And the term smart protein just works better with government, with a lot of stakeholders, which are important in India. And alternative protein is what they call it globally, but we also use that term. Now, what is the smart protein sector really made of? Right. And what does the GFI India as an organization do? So we basically work on creating the current food system. There's a current food system, right? The way food is produced, the way we consume food, the way farmers produce crops, the way they are processed, the way animals are raised through factory farming or vice versa, or through other methods they are raised for their protein needs. How do we want to evaluate this sector? Really depends on a lot of things. It's climatic impact, it's health impact, it's sustainability factors. At the end of the day, people also care about the price at which they're getting the food, because ultimately everybody cares about price, taste, and convenience. And roti kapda makan, food is at the heart of everybody's kind of life. And I think that's why I have spent 9 years studying food through all of those different lenses. And as an organization, we are basically having a lot of international partners as well in GFI USA, GFI Brazil, GFI Europe, GFI Asia Pacific region, GFI Asia, GFI Israel, and GFI India as well. So in India, we've been functional for 3 years. Globally, the GFI USA office started 5 years ago. And all of us are independent non-profits. What does that mean? We are a completely non-profit pro bono think tank, consultancy, sector building organization. So we work with all of our stakeholders without any commercial relationship. And we develop this sector through three key pillars, which is science and technology, corporate engagement, which also involves startup and innovation and all of the things that I do, and also policy or government work of engaging with government. Because if government decide that this is a focus area, they'll probably fund a lot of research in this area, make a lot of progressive regulatory policies in this area, stuff like that. And science and technology is obviously very, very important. A lot of you are science students. You understand why these products are very, very scientific heavy, and why the production of these products is also rooted in science and technology and engineering. And obviously, the main goal of this problem that we are trying to solve for our North Star is feeding 9.7 billion people by 2050. By the way, one-sixth of these 9.7 billion people are going to be Indians by the year 2050, which you might have read in some of the resources as well. So how do we feed them? Currently, the best sources of protein, by the way, 80% of Indians are protein deficient. And the biggest misconception that a lot of people have is, hey, Indians are vegetarians. Why would they eat meat, or why would they like to try these products? That's the biggest misconception that people have. We consume the least amount of meat per capita per year. That is true, no doubt about it. But the immense size of our country, and at the same time, 70% of Indians are self reported non vegetarians. A large survey by the government of India was done a few years ago, and these numbers revealed that. It was a census level data kind of study. And obviously, when I say non-vegetarian, I'm also including eggs in it. So when you include egg consumption, they become like 72% of Indians are self-reported non-vegetarians, which in itself is a big surprise to a lot of people, because we've been told India is a vegetarian country. We don't eat meat, but that is just not rooted in facts. And the fact that it's rapidly growing up. So people eat meat because it's an aspirational food. And most people in India cannot eat meat right now is because they cannot afford to eat one. If you give people more disposable incomes. So you might have read about the food processing sector growing really, really fast. And that is true, because people are getting more westernized, more disposable incomes are coming in, households are becoming more nuclear. So all of those reasons are also kind of reasons for growth. There's a very strong correlation between the growth of income and the growth of consumption of meat, eggs, and dairy products. Because it's obvious, right? People would want to shift to better sources of protein. And they've been told time and again that, animal sources of protein are the most bioavailable ones, which has been true for the largest part of past history. And imagine this, right? Meats, eggs, and dairy, we've been consuming the way they are for millions of years, since like Homo sapiens first existed, the way they started hunting, then we discovered fire. Since then, we've been eating meat the same way. Kill an animal, take that meat and eat it. And how does the animal make meat? Basically, it eats plants or other animals. But ultimately, all of this energy conversion happens from plants, right? Because plants are the most efficient sources of converting solar through photosynthesis, solar energy, and other resources into food for us. But ultimately, we are consuming it through an intermediary, right? So it takes 9 calories of food fed to a chicken to make 1 calorie of meat. For a cow or for beef, it's 100 calories that makes 1 calorie out. So the feed conversion is really broken. And it's kind of intuitive, right? If you really think about it, we are growing all of this food, then we are processing all of that food, then we are making it into feed, then we are transporting the feed to, feeding animals. A lot of carbon emissions throughout the cycle. Something called life cycle analysis is the terminology they use for it. And ultimately, those animals are using those resources, growing up, breathing, leaving, cows emit a lot of carbon dioxide, methane, stuff like that. So that is going into the environment. And then we are slaughtering them, but we are not able to consume all of their meat. You throw away 20, 30, 40% of it. And then whatever we get is really wasteful, because we are using 75% of agricultural land to supply one third of global protein supply. So look at it. Three-fourth of land is basically only giving us one third of global protein supply. So it's a really inefficient system fundamentally. And again, it's the biggest polluter as well. Like, if you think about the pollution in Delhi, because all of you are from Delhi, it's horrible. Compare Mumbai, then look at India. Look at all the transportation combined, flights, trains, cars, and then you look at China, then you look at USA, then you compare all of those carbon emissions from transportation sector. Factory farming gives more carbon emissions or greenhouse gases emissions than this entire transportation sector combined, which is insanely, surprising fact for a lot of people. Also, it's one of the top 2 to 3 reasons which is causing the world's most environmental problems. Obviously, if you're using 75% agricultural land, just to give you an example, few thousand liters of water would be needed to make 1 kg of beef. Compare that to, plant-based meat from Beyond or Impossible, the companies you might have seen in the past 7 days. It takes only a few hundred liters of water. So obviously, our soil health, our water tables are going down. So that's why it's also very, very important. The other thing is, plant-based meats and plant-based diets are inherently also slightly healthier, because you can get fiber, you can get complex carbohydrates added into these products. And at the same time, the end goal is not to tell people not to eat meat, because nobody's going to listen. Scientists have known all of this, environmentalists have known all of this for decades now, but the change theory hasn't worked. And like I said, the global meat production is only increasing very, very rapidly over the past 30, 40 years. And it's also increasing very rapidly in Asia and India. If you look at the next 20 years, India, if you see this on my screen, is dark red, and this is poultry meat. If you talk to anybody, and we live in this, sometimes we live in this world where we think that, food is coming out of this utopian system where farmers have few chickens in their farms, few cows, and, everybody's just slaughtering after the milk, after cow is done giving milk, or a buffalo is done giving milk, or a chicken, sustainably sculled and then supplied to you. That's not the way, industrialized factory farming or animal agriculture works. So rapidly, these things are being built up in a country like India. Obviously, the West has already suffered a lot from factory farming, and now the growth that is going to come in consumption of meat is going to be the highest in Southeast Asia. And obviously, people are going to keep demanding meat over and over again. So how do we give them this high quality protein, which is only available to plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, which can be only done through plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy companies that are coming up in the market now, through fermentation derived meat, eggs, and dairy companies, and through cultivated or cell-based meat, eggs, and dairy companies. So these three are the key verticals which makes the smart protein or the alternative protein sector. And we'll deep dive into a little bit later on. Our change theory is very, very simple. Make something people want. If you tell somebody to not eat meat, they're not going to listen. The numbers are only going to increase. So what do? You make a product which tastes exactly the same or less, which tastes exactly the same or better, which costs exactly the same or less, and which is equally accessible and conveniently available in the market. So the goal is not to change anybody's behavior or to tell them how to eat. The consumer behavior is on the consumer side. So there's not a lot of point in creating a lot of awareness, because people have been trying to do that for many, many, many years. Scientists from Harvard, Oxford, the theory of change which has worked very well for us in the growth of this sector is you change the production. If you give people a simple enough switch, they'll shift to sustainable sources, better sources. People consume meat not because of the way it's currently produced by slaughtering animals. They consume it despite of the way it's currently produced, and time and again, consumer research has shown these things. And we obviously want to work towards a better food system, which is better for animals, for health, for planet, for resources, all of it, right? So, what are the solutions? Like I was saying, three: plant based, fermentation, and animal cell culture. And all three ways you can get meat, eggs, and dairy products. That's just a matter of applying science and technology to the world and these products, which has not been done before, especially in a country like India. We process only 5% of our food. USA processes 70-80% of its food. UK processes 80-90% of its food. And they have a very developed infrastructure, a lot of beautiful universities like Cornell, UC Davis, which have been land grant universities doing a lot of research in food science for decades. Compare that to my alma mater, NIFTM. It was only started in 2012. Yes, we've had CFTRI and ICT for a few decades, but this is all relatively new. So that's why there's a huge demand for scientists, for people who understand zoology, microbiology, food safety, food technology, biotechnology, fermentation, bioprocess engineering, chemical engineering. There's a huge demand for these kind of people in a country like India, where we don't have that expertise in creating these products. And for solving this huge sci-tech gap, we started an initiative called the Smart Protein Innovation Challenge. So obviously, as an organization, we work with biggest FMCG companies, biggest food companies in country, biggest QSR chains, a lot of startups, investors, accelerators, incubators, researchers, scientists, academia. We work with FSSAI, we work with DBT, DST, and we are a team of just 13 people. So it's an insanely productive organization as well, because we tackle this problem for all areas and we want to really sustainably build it from the grounds up. And this was one of such interventions where we wanted to educate a lot of youth about this sector. And some of you might have seen this in the past. It was heavily circulated within DU. A lot of people from different DU colleges participated in our August to December 2020 kind of this challenge of 5 months. I've laid out 5 phases for you. The end goal was to inspire 1,000 plus people about the sector, just like you're getting a 7-day course and getting a certificate in it. We did like 500, 600 people were certified in a 1 month digital smart protein lab, which was much more exhaustive, many more quizzes, much more intensive. And then they went on to create teams, they went on to create proposals. You can see a lot of brilliant ideas on the side. People are making plant-based dairy from indigenous crops, people are making meat from indigenous crops, all of these things. And then there was ideation phase and an inspiration phase, a lot of mentoring workshops, stuff like that. If you're interested about this, like I said, there's a website here given at the bottom, smartproteinchallenge.in, and you can go at it and take a look. This year we are going to have one more challenge, so we'll love all of you, for all of you to participate in it and kind of go through this journey. And if you look at one of these teams like ProMeat, and if you look them up on LinkedIn, they are having a lot of success recently. They have been accepted into a lot of cohorts. They recently got a international recognition in a competition sponsored by Unilever and Kellogg. So a lot of good stuff has been happening out of this. And now I'll invite like Akshay to talk a little bit about cultivated meat, because I think a lot of our resources in the past 7 days were focused on plant-based meat and fermentation-derived meat, eggs, and dairy products. But we did not talk enough about how to take cells out of animals and make these products, directly. And ultimately, just to leave you with the point before Akshay takes on, it's going to be X plus Y plus Z. Plant-based meat is going to be X percentage of the market in 2050. Why? That is, fermentation-derived meat is going to be a certain percentage of the market in 2050, and cultivated or cell-based meat, eggs, and dairy is going to be Z percentage of the market in 2050. And ultimately, there's still going to be some people who, after giving so many options, are still going to slaughter animals and consume that. But the end goal is to reduce that and optimize for X, Y, and Z. How much we can optimize really depends on how many resources go into it, how many students take this sector up, how many investors come into this sector up. Recently, one of the biggest launches that is going to come in the 1 month is Imagine Meats. So Ritesh and Janelia Deshmukh, a lot of you might know them as Bollywood celebrities. They've started a big company. GFI India has been involved with helping them set up that company. And when more and more such people come in, I think a lot more companies are going to happen. Dozens of companies already exist in the country. Globally, more than 600 companies exist across of these three verticals. And when I started working at GFI back in December 2018, there were only like 30 or 40. So imagine the growth from 30 to 40 companies to 600 companies over a period of 2-3 years. And imagine what it's going to be in 2025. So that's the new norm. People have accepted this is not a trend anymore. This is a fundamental shift in the way we produce food. And no matter who, brilliant researchers across universities, across the world, environmentalists, public policy researchers, government people, everybody started to realize the importance. So, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he recently tried one of the cultivated meat products through GFI Israel, and he was really convinced for the need of this in world. At the same time, brilliant people like Bill Gates, a lot of investors, celebrities. Couple of days ago, Bill Gates launched his latest book, and he talks a lot about cultivated meat as well. And we don't have enough time in 1 hour to continue discussion on this, right? I can talk about this for 24 hours, and it will still be in less time. So, in the interest of time, I'll just get Akshay to kind of get moving with the cultivated meat stuff.
Hey, thanks very much, Shardul. I feel really excited whenever I listen to it again and again. It doesn't matter. And it's super exciting to see so many young students participating here, the future talent pool of India. So yeah, without further ado, maybe I'll just jump into what is cultivated meat. So cultivated meat is actually produced using many tissue engineering techniques, and which has been widely exploited for several years in several fields. In other words, techniques in tissue engineering or biomedical sciences, which have been utilized here in terms of producing animal meat without actually growing an animal. So what happens here is people take a small biopsy from an animal and then use cell culture techniques and various other complementary scientific techniques to actually create the whole meat in terms of taste, texture, as well as the three-dimensional properties of actual meat. The whole premise of cultivated meat revolves around developing methodologies using, let's say, culturing of muscle cells in combination with, say, fat cells, adipocytes, and many other supporting cells to replicate the sensory as well as the nutritional profile of animal meat, obviously to the liking of consumers and something which is very safe for consumption. So it involves various steps which generally entail the techniques which I've talked about before, such as cell line development, immortalization of animal cells, which means that these cells can divide for infinitely, basically, and giving the cells an animal-like structure, and also optimizing methodologies, bioprocesses, which takes something which from a very, very small scale into something at a large scale production, fit for consumption for let's say, a lot of people. So yeah, so the next slide, correct. So this is how the cultivated meat production looks like at scale. So Shardul, the previous slide, please. Shardul, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I think there's a delay. So the whole point is that ultimately we will have to go to a large scale commercial production like this, and we have to apply a food production lens to scale it up. So this is a little more high level explanation of how things actually happen, and it's also important to find genuine animal species, right, for extraction of muscle cells and derived cell lines, then start the cell culture, and it could be from, let's say, pigs or marine species or even chicken. So this would also mean standardizing various aspects of cell line development, like I said before, including something called as differentiation, because muscle cells differentiate and they no more divide. So this differentiation aspect in terms of muscle is very important, and that these are some of the challenges which the current, let's say, cultivated meat startup companies or research institutes, research groups across the world are facing. We also have to focus on, let's say, media formulations, because cell culture media, where the cells actually grow, are very important. And what the companies in this field or research institutes or groups are doing is that they want to create serum-free media, because the cell culture media has something called as FBS, fetal bovine serum, which is derived from the calf of a cow, right? So they actually derive this from they slaughter these pregnant cows, and then they derive this fetal bovine serum, which everybody uses very widely in research and development across the world. So I think that's one of the critical areas where people are focusing in order to create serum-free media, let's say plant-based media formulations, which could help grow these cells in the same way as with FBS or fetal bovine serum. So after many such iterations, if you see here, that's called as phase one, what I was talking about so far. If you move to phase two, we have where this pilot scale or prototype which you have developed will go through multiple reiterations and will require novel bioreactor systems, because you need to grow cells in a very, very large scale, right? Because you might have to grow billions and billions of cells to create, let's say, 1 kg of meat or something. So even in terms of media, people are looking at recycling to actually conserve media, cut the cost, etc. Sensors for automating key steps here. So these are all some of the complex things which a lot of people who are focused on cultivated meat are doing across the world. So finally, to industrial scale production, which will involve larger bioscale processing unit, huge bioreactors, connected bioreactors, etc., and also introduce something for supporting these cells, because cells really inside the body of the animal, they have some support system. That's the reason why when you look at meat, you'll feel that texture as well as mouthfeel, as well as the three-dimensional structure, how it actually looks to your eye. So these are some of the important technologies employed to improve the structure, texture, and taste, and also very important to make it very cost effective. Next slide, please, Shardul. Yeah, so this is just highlight the timeline of this field. It's also important to remember that this is a sector which is taking advantage of fundamental advances, like I said before, in biomedical sciences. So this basically all started with Jason Matheny. He was a PhD student at the University of Maryland in the United States, who published a commentary about in vitro cultured meat production, which we call it now as cultivated meat, on how to either grow muscle cells from poultry, cattle, fish, or pigs, and they can be grown as shields and stacked over each other, and which ultimately increases thickness, and it actually resembles meat. So this person, this guy Jason, he went on to co-founding New Harvest, the world's first non-profit organization focused on cultivated meat research. But the field actually truly picked up in 2013. If you see the first picture here, that is Mark Post, when we actually first witnessed the public showing where a lamb meat burger was eaten on screen live, and then after this field just picked up and went boom, and you see that right now currently we have like 65 plus different companies. Or 70 plus different companies at this point in time, which are actually working towards creating something unique in the cultivated meat space. So this is actually a really exciting and evolving landscape. And if you see the next slide, this is basically a snapshot of the different startup companies which have come up across the globe. So at the end of 2018, there were a few dozen companies, and right now in 2021 and counting, it's like 70, 75 and 75 plus different companies, and perhaps many more in stealth. In other words, these companies have not really come out to the public saying that we are doing something in the cultivated meat sector. So apart from this, a lot of corporate behemoths as well as big investors are pouring millions of dollars into this industry across plant-based as well as cultivated meat. Let's say if we had this conversation, let's say 3 months before, we would have said that cultivated meat has not been actually approved by the government or the regulatory board of any country so far. But there was this truly historic moment in 2020 December, when Singapore first enabled cultivated meat to be sold in the market for human consumption. And it just says that it's obviously very safe now to consume this kind of meat. So this is basically the picture of the cultivated chicken bites from Eat Just, which is basically a cultivated meat company. So this is just to set an example as to cultivated meat is actually a reality, and it's going to come up in its leaps and bounds in the next 7 decades. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So how we, GFI India, are engaging with different labs in India to help build a robust Indian scientific ecosystem. We are focusing on 4 broad areas of activities. We are initially engaging with incubation and commercialization centers in key universities and industries. We inform various stakeholders, in other words, various people from business, various people from government agencies on the opportunity in the alternative protein space, build talent pools from students like you, and creating a generation of smart protein entrepreneurs down the line. So secondly, we are also enabling specific research endeavors at this university by providing scientific expertise as well as network support to help researchers discover previously unexplored opportunities, white space areas, which we call it as, from both the scientific perspective as well as to help build indigenous markets in India across the smart protein sector. Thirdly, what we are doing is we are putting our efforts to introduce coursework at universities and colleges, just like today, to influence curriculum inclusion, to create experience and expert young research talents who will be future ready to contribute to this emerging or sunrise sector. So lastly, we are building center of excellences. When I say center of excellences, it encompasses everything what I've said before, and also top class, high level, state of art research facilities and research centers focusing on different pillars of cultivated meat, let's say plant-based meat, fermentation, etc. And also building consortia. Consortia is a group of researchers and people from businesses, from government agencies, who will help to basically drive the sector forward and turbo boost it, so that India also comes up in terms of the smart protein innovation as well as building new products down the line. So some of the examples is that we have been engaging with some top tier universities in India, IIT Madras, IIT Mumbai, where we're actually connecting researchers, helping them with mammalian cell culture research, driving publications, coursework, etc. We have also been closely working with startups such as MyoWorks, which recently got a 50 lakh grant funding from BioRack, and they are currently incubated in an incubator where they're actually building their first prototype towards commercialization. On similar lines, we have engaged with a lot of other universities such as Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Lucknow, GB Pant University, PSAT, etc. Moving to the next thing is one example which I would like to discuss here or just present to you is that we have actually worked with CCMB to get DPD grant awarded to CCMB with the support of National Research Center for Meat, Adult Incubation Center, and a sum of 4.6 crore INR was awarded to CCMB for a project which basically focuses on growing sheep meat from sheep muscle cells. So till the time last year, this was the highest amount of grant money awarded by any government agency towards cultivated meat research. And recently, we witnessed actually UC Davis from University from US, which got a grant of 3.5 million. All these events, all these successes have been driven by GFI globally by the support of a lot of researchers as well as a lot of employees in GFI. So this is some of the things which I wanted to actually tell. And the last slide is I just want to focus on how important it is that research questions need to be answered through collaborative as well as interdisciplinary approach. We should actually focus on attracting and leveraging on fantastic scientific talent and fantastic student pool in colleges like that of yours, where we can actually make students as well as to be entrepreneurs future ready and across diverse areas of smart protein meat, such as meat sciences, cell biology, chemical engineering, environmental sciences, across everything, even animal science as well as genetics. So all of these fields have a really important role in order to help the cultivated meat space grow leaps and bounds. So with this, I just like to end my presentation, our presentation, and we are open to questions.
Thank you so much, Akshay, for that context. And just to tell everybody, I think you understand a little bit about cultivated meat heavily today, and that was done on purpose because we've submitted a lot of resources to you already. And I'm assuming you've gone through a lot of them over the past 7 days, right? You must have read our state of industry reports. You must have seen our TED Talks. You might have seen a lot of podcasts. You must have heard some of those things, and you already understand a lot of these things. But we still wanted to convey, the top level stuff of why we do what we do. And I think from here, I think we can take on some questions, Tanya, that you had, and then maybe everybody, if you have any specific questions, there's a Q&A button that you can see in your dashboard on Zoom. You can submit questions through the Q&A button, and I can now enable the chat for you as well, so that you can chat directly with the panelists. Okay. And I'm not enabling it for attendees, so you cannot chat with each other, but you can definitely send us messages or any questions through the chat box or the Q&A box. Go on, Tanya, with your questions.
First of all, kudos to Good Food Institute India for like getting fundings from like DBT, Department of Biotechnology. Even I am like a research oriented person, so I like know these kind of fundings require a lot of back end support and everything. Documentation needs to be there to get that amount from these reputed organizations. So that's that. Let's begin with our Q&A session. So I have curated like 20 around questions from the questions that we got from the participants in the past 7 days. So first question to the panelists is, how prepared is India in accepting the smart protein sector slash, and what will be the biggest hurdle in your opinion?
Sure, I can take it, Akshay, on a general perspective. So obviously there are a lot of challenges. Some of them I covered, right? Obviously, the fact that our food processing industry is not really mature. So let's think about, you might have read about extrusion through these past 7 days, right? Which is a major texturization technology to convert plant proteins into the final mimicking kind of plant-based meat products. But no extruders exist in a country like India, even the ones at say FTRI and NIFTIM are non-functional. We recently found one at Transdisciplinary University in Bangalore, but that is just lab scale. What about infrastructure like pilot scale, production scale facilities? Those don't exist. So obviously, if there are novel ways, you can work from the crops, right? You can work on seeds to get high protein crops. So think about it. We use wheat, we use rice, we use soy, we use corn, because we've been for decades optimizing these crops, but we've been neglecting a lot of indigenous crops, millets, pulses, a lot of lentils, which are high in proteins. Not enough research has been done on that. But for example, ICRISAT, they have a lot of expertise in crop science. So partnering up with Q universities like this, there are brilliant universities under CSIR. There are a lot of IITs who have expertise in engineering, like IIT Kharagpur. So we have a lot of hope at the same time that though a lot of these things don't exist, but there's a lot of overlapping skills in the market, which if put together in a concise, laser focused approach on this sector, India can have a distinct advantage as well. Obviously, talent pool is the biggest advantage. Young talent, which is educated in science, who understands all of these things and probably understands technology. And not just that, we talked a lot about sci-tech, but there are a lot of non-scientific skills as well. At the end of the day, you're creating an entire sector from scratch. So you're going to need people who knows digital marketing. There are going to be people who knows marketing, strategy, business, commerce, everybody, lawyers, because regulatory approvals through FSSAI, IP protection, all of that. A lot of things are going to come up, and everybody who understands the basic of the sector can, even if you want to be a lawyer later on for XYZ reasons, maybe you're studying botany now, but you decide to be a lawyer because that's your true passion. Understanding how crop patenting works, or these
Yeah,
processes at a
IPAR.
scientific level,
We
yeah, could be very very helpful when you're looking at IP and stuff like that. So just giving you one example, but there is a lot of cross functional
Yeah,
approach to
we
all of
like
these
have
things.
a curriculum related to intellectual property rights, because that's
Exactly.
mostly related to science people, because most of the innovations like almost comes from science people. And also there are various institutes, as you mentioned, like ICRISAT, and I know one of them, like it's NIPGR and National Institute of Plant Genomic Research. So there are various institutes that we can knock the door at, and we had like more opportunities. So let's move on
Exactly.
to this.
So there are a lot of opportunities and challenges, but I think we see a lot of potential in India over the next 10 years for this sector's growth. So just to give you one quick example here of what I mean, like think about cultivated meat. Yeah, exactly. That's a great question from Jen. I'd like to address that first. Like, why do we need three different things?
Yeah.
Ultimately, these three different categories are kind of catering to three different type of consumers. There are going to be people. So technically, there are going to be people who are the product made from plant-based in whey is going to be everyone, or is there an internet issue?
I
Um,
guess there is a connectivity
Are you able to
issue.
hear me, Akshay? No
yeah,
worries.
you
I
were
think I'm
cutting
back.
in and out.
So
Yeah, you're back. Yes.
no worries. So basically, these three different verticals cater to three different cohorts, and we don't know. It's very novel. So we don't know at economies of scale which is going to be what. So that's why I said X, Y plus Z. We don't know. I didn't say 25% of the market in 2020 is going to be plant-based. I said all four are going to coexist, including, animal slaughtered meat or conventional meat, eggs and dairy products as well. It's just the matter of which sector grows fast, which products are better taken up by consumers right now. Everywhere out of these 600 companies that I mentioned globally, almost 70% are in the plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy space, because that is happening now, because that was comparatively easier to do. Cell-based or cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy are going to take some time to become feasible in terms of cost. At the same time, we have still started exploring fermentation-derived meat,
Mm,
eggs, and dairy, using a lot of microbes to create this biomass, which we can texturize
mm,
and make into meat, eggs, or dairy products, or get precision fermentation and get those microbes to make specific proteins which are similar to animal proteins, which are more bioavailable, stuff like that. So there's a need for all of these three areas to grow, and maybe by 2050 the answer would be clearer which of these three
mhm.
categories
Yep,
has the most market
exactly.
share.
Survival of the fittest food here as well.
Yeah,
Darwin.
in
Yes.
some ways, yeah, absolutely. Which of these categories gonna grow, to
Yeah.
what extent we don't know, but that's why we have to work on all three simultaneously until it grows.
So our next question is, people are switching their diets from non-vegetarian to vegan, or maybe if it's plant-based or it's cultivated meat. If cell-based meat is not vegan, then why will vegans eat cell-based meat?
Great question. I started my whole presentation with that. These sector, the biggest misconception is these products are not for vegans. The whole point is you're not catering to vegans. And the biggest
Hmm.
misconception is veganism is driving the growth of this sector. If you look at the data of Impossible or Beyond, so Beyond Meat is one of the largest companies in this
Hmm.
area, billions of dollars worth. It recently did an IPO, which was the most successful initial public offering on New York Stock Exchange. So these companies, 90% of their consumers are non-vegetarians. No vegetarians or vegans are consuming these products because they're not meant for them. Why would you replicate chicken, mutton, fish,
Exactly,
or
for
to its exact.
flexitarians.
Exactly. So
It's
the
that.
goal is to make products for non-vegetarians. And then if you ask me, why would vegans eat it? It's not meant for vegans. The simple answer is that. So you have to cater this. So even in India, maybe 0.2, 0.4, 0.5% of the population is vegan. And no matter how fast it's going to grow, the number of people who are going to eat meat is going to grow 10 times faster over the next 20 years.
Exactly.
And that's absolute fact. And for those reasons, you
Mm,
have to cater those rest of the 98% of the population in a country if you really need to
mm.
create an impact. So a lot of startups are also misleaded initially, and then they realize after a year or 2 years that, hey, my customers are not really vegan. I've been messaging to the wrong people and developing
So
products to
yeah,
the
I
wrong
have a
cohort of
question
consumers.
in mind. Like, will we be like truly successful in convincing these orthodox people to like eat plant-based or cultivated meat and not the real meat?
That's another great question because I answered that question at the very start as well. It's
Yeah.
not about convincing anybody at all. That's the whole theory of change. You produce, and then the
Mm.
fundamental default offering becomes a better choice, and people want to shift to a better choice because they see the merits. And again, like I said,
Mm.
some very small fraction of the cohort will never change, and that's okay. But we can still have a huge impact even if 50, 60, 70% of the people shift towards these more sustainable sources, because there are immense benefits, right? Environmental benefits which you can claim. Antibiotics is something which we did not even talk, but Harleen ma'am was talking about it earlier. Like, imagine this fact: 75% of all the antibiotics made in the USA are given to animals and not humans. That's a huge
Exactly.
number, right? And even in India, we don't even have that data. But if you have a veterinary doctor that you know, a relative, ask them like the amount of
Mm.
antibiotics that are fed to animals, which bioaccumulate, mercury, heavy metals, all of those things come into our food system, come into a human kind of a
Yeah,
biomagnification
food
chain, and
chain.
it becomes a huge issue in the food chain. So for XYZ reasons, whether it's a health reason, whether it's shifting to a healthier diet reason, whether it's
Mm.
shifting to a more sustainable source, whether it's for water use, whether it's for land use, whether it's to curb down climate change, there are just so many benefits a business can claim by making these products. So I'll just give you one
Yeah.
example. Now think about, people will obviously say the biggest meat companies. The biggest meat producer in the world is Tyson Foods. If you Google them, Tyson, and JBS is the second. Actually, Tyson is the biggest in the US. The world's biggest is the one in Brazil, JBS. And both of them
Mhm.
have committed. In fact, 9 out of 10 largest, biggest food companies, the Unilevers of the world, the Nestle's of the world, all of them have committed to creating products in this sector. At one of our conferences a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, the Tyson Foods CEO, global CEO, said that we are a protein company. We are not a meat company, because ultimately the
Okay.
goal is to give people protein. And if people are shifting to better choices of protein, why not cater it through better choices of production?
Exactly. There's a like a psychological stigma that it's only for a certain proportion of the population, but
Yeah.
it's like for everyone who has a choice of having it.
Yeah.
So with that, we can like move on to the next question, which is like, why is there a parity between the prices in the plant-based dairy products and the traditional dairy products that we use?
Sure. Akshay, please feel free to, by the way, add to any of these points. Obviously, the price point is because, think about it. We've been optimizing animal dairy for 50, 60 years. There are a lot of subsidies, a lot of grants. And obviously, once you focus enough resources on anything, economies of scale hit in. What I mean by economies of scale is, if you want to make 100 kgs of a product, you're going to cost, say,
Mm.
1,000 rupees. But if you want to make 10,000 kgs of that product, it's going to
Cost
probably cost
less.
much lesser than that, because
Yeah.
product economies of scale hit in. And obviously, because these companies are small, they cannot afford large facilities, the markets are small, not enough investment is going in, which is slowly changing. And with time, that's why we are very, very
So
confident
yeah, maybe
that,
in the near future we will be able to cost down and budget down these prices if we are
exactly.
like
Yeah.
enamorating this
Yeah, and
sector.
Akshay can give a great example from cultivated meat about cost reduction. Just the, media 100x reduction. Maybe you can talk about it, Akshay, to give people the $400,000 burger from Mark Post and how the
Yeah,
costs
yeah.
have come down. Yeah.
Yeah, the $400,000 burger from Mark Post is one of the famous examples, and how the cost has come down right now. It has come down like 100, 200x from what was it like just 8 years before,
Like,
right?
is it really like $400,000 for a burger? Like, why would somebody go for that? Like, luxurious
No,
people
that was the
can like,
cost of creating it because of the R&D which went
oh,
behind it, the amount of
okay, okay,
research which they had been doing for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And that was the total cost of doing that research and getting to that first burger was $400,000. Then after that, the graph, the slope went very down steep, right? So that's what Shardul was also talking about, the economies of scale, where when you increase the production, when you come to uh, let's say key technological innovations where you can actually cut the cost, then that's when you actually reach price parity. And this is what a lot of companies are focusing on, right? How to achieve that price parity. That is one of the biggest challenges. And once they achieve it, along with the taste, as well as the mouth feel, everything else, the three-dimensional structure, most probably, I think that's when this market is going to actually really boom.
okay. Also, I have another question related to dairy and eggs only. It's like, what can be the alternative of eggs as a binding agent in bakeries?
Yeah, so again, just to clarify, we don't focus on any products or bakery applications or smoothies or high protein bars or any of those things which are meant for vegetarians, because that's not where the
Okay.
impact could be really created. Those are comparatively easier things to do. That's why, and those are good things to work on as a food scientist. Maybe it's innovative, all of that. But as the area of core focus, we only focus on plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy. So bakery applications is something we don't focus on, because I think it's comparatively much easier. Everybody's already making vegan cakes and vegetarian cakes. It's not too big of a deal. If you go to your local bakery, you're going to find exact replicated cakes which you don't even realize कि इसमें अंडा नहीं है. So the goal is not to solve for such small problems. It's to solve for real egg. Let's just say anda bhurji or an omelette. How do you replicate that?
A
And one of the
scrambled
companies
egg.
which, exactly, one of the companies which you must have seen is Eat Just. It recently sold 300th equivalent of an egg. 300 millionth equivalent of an egg. So that's a huge amount of sales across the world. And do you know what they use to make their egg? They use mung bean protein. And India has been producing mung bean for 4,000 years, right? And we are one of the largest producers of mung bean. So imagine if an
Mm.
entrepreneur or if a scientist works on this, or somebody sets up a protein isolation facility for mung bean and then starts supplying to Eat Just and all of these companies using. And just think about chickpea, think about bunch of millets, pulses, which are indigenous to India, which are specific to India, which are indigenous crops, which have a lot of biodiversity in India. So imagine the immense potential of things we could do with all of these different crops, create a lot of different value chains, create a lot of different products. So I know plant-based cheeses are being made from cauliflowers, they are made from millets, they are made from pulse. Don't think of it as, deconstruct it. What is meat really? Meat is just a bunch of proteins, carbohydrates, amino acids, fats put together by nature through the process of evolution through animals, right? What you're trying to do is understand all of those individual elements, deconstruct it at fundamental individual levels, and then use science, technology to kind of put them together. Maybe it's from plants, maybe it's through animal cells, or it's through fermentation or microbe derived products, and then you're kind of making the exact same products which taste the same, which smells the same. To give you an example of how scientists are thinking about it, in USA you might have seen people tailgate, right? They park their cars before football games, they set up their grills, they put on hamburger patties and they grill it. So animal beef patty would sizzle at a certain, or if you go to a local kebab shop, in Delhi, they would melt, char, or sizzle at a certain frequency of sound length. Scientists have tried to replicate that sound wavelength as
Mm.
well at which it sizzles. So you have to replicate all elements of cooking, processing, the way consumers are used to doing it. If you give them a plant-based milk, so think about a raw pressery milk, or you think about any other milk which is driven by, let's say, almond milk or cashew milk. These are not
Mm.
plant-based milks. These are just milk flavored milks. And the fundamental difference between those two is, in the plant-based milk category, you're trying to functionally replicate conventional animal milk. So it should, if you put it in coffee, if you put it in tea, it should exactly function like, a cow's milk or a buffalo's milk does. And that's the biggest challenge to solve for. That's why it's not very easy. Otherwise, anybody would just take soy, process it in their house, make soy milk
Mm.
just like everybody does. But those are not plant-based milks, which is the biggest misconception again. You have to really look at the protein structures, you have to really replicate all of that. And same would go for meat. That's why a soy chunk or a soy mock meat product is not plant-based meat. Those are just mock meats, meat analogs, which are very, very basic. And they've been there since 1970s. In fact, in Thailand and countries where Buddhist monks were there, China, they've been there for centuries. People have been eating setan, tofu, all of these things to replicate. We've been eating kathal. So those are mock meats. Those are for meats, or, very basic mimicking meats. Concepts of meat. And again, if you make products from those are not really plant-based meats. You have to really think of the science behind it. We have a lot of webinars and workshops to think through all of these things. So I'll leave you guys to kind of explore all of this once I've said this.
Yeah, I would like now Pratiksha to moderate the session with the questions that we have. So, Pratiksha, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Am I audible?
Yes. Hi,
Okay,
Pratiksha.
so hello. So the next question is, what would you suggest to a person who is not able to give up on traditional dairy products but wants to?
Yeah, so I would not suggest anything to him. I would suggest an entrepreneur that make a product for that person, which is a simple switch. Because, like I said, it's not about convincing the customer. See, I will never get convinced. Nobody likes being told what to eat, what not to eat. If you go and tell your friends, that's why people hate veganism in many ways, right? Because you're telling constantly somebody not to eat something. But people want to eat dairy. People want to consume. I love my cheese. I'm a vegetarian, right? I'm not a vegan, and I love my cheese, and I don't eat plant-based cheese because it's not available in my hometown in Amravati. If it was at the corner shop like an Amul cheese cube is, I would go and buy it at the same price point. If it tasted the same, if it melted the same on my pizza. So those are the things you need to solve for, right? If you're not solving for that, and if it doesn't taste like cheese, if it tastes like chalk, if it doesn't melt on my cheese like mozzarella does, then what's the point of making these products? That's what I'm trying to convey. You don't convince anybody. You just give them a simple switch by working on the production side, and then people switch automatically. Why wouldn't they? If it's better for me, if it's better for environment, I'd just switch, right? And if it's available at the same price point at the local kirana shop, why wouldn't I do that? So yeah, that's one way of answering that question.
Okay, so the next question is, why does products like Impossible Burger gets a cauliflower treatment in India?
What is a cauliflower treatment?
It was something in the session. It was not briefly explained.
Like cauliflower treatment is like, okay, we like don't care if there's a burger, impossible burger there, but we want our normal Mekalu tikki only.
Hmm.
That's like,
So, yeah, my first answer is Impossible Burger is not available to Indians. 99.999% of them have never tried it or tested it. I've been to Singapore, I've tried it. It tastes exactly like meat. And I've been a non-vegetarian for 12 years of my life growing up, and I remember the taste of meat. I've been a vegetarian for only past 10 years. But again, like that does not matter. But if you eat something which you've not even tried, so that statement is invalid in the first instance because people haven't tried. What people try in India is, let's just say, mock meats, which some companies are trying to offer. But if you try, go and order on your websites right now, go to bluetryfoods.com, which is a company startup based out of Mumbai, and order their chicken nuggets. They'll taste exactly like chicken nuggets. And don't take my word for it. Look at YouTube videos, look at blind tests, look at what happened with KFC. KFC is known for chicken, right? Its whole fundamental selling point is, this juicy chicken, leg pieces, breasts, all of that. And they pilot launched plant-based meats, and there were huge lines in front of KFCs. Not just KFCs, Domino's, McDonald's, Burger King's, White Castle, all of the chains that you can think of are now involved in the sector and are selling these products. None of that has happened in India. Now, the next question is, why is Impossible Beyond Eat just not in India? Because import export duties are really horrible. And at the same time, we don't consume hamburgers. These are hamburger companies. Americans eat hamburgers 4 times a week. So that's why local product market fit, local entrepreneurs making galati kebab, shami kebabs, mutton keema, stuff which is biryani meat, all of that which is specific to India is very, very important. And people are doing that in India. Startups have started offering it, and soon you're going to have plethora of products to try from.
Okay, so next one. So, being a philosophy student, it's my favorite question. So, how does the industry know that plants don't feel pain?
Hmm. Yeah, I think Akshay, I'll let you take that. But my simple answer is obviously it's established in science that philosophically, I don't know how to answer it. I can answer it scientifically. It's a hard problem of consciousness, right? Philosophically speaking. So you would never really know that. I don't know your consciousness, so you can really not establish that. But obviously, there's no nervous system and all of that. And Akshay can answer that question a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, there have been experiments where people
like
have
instead of
proven that.
nervous system, they have vascular system, na?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
basically, there's an analogy between plant system and animal systems. Like they
I
have
understand.
vascular as well.
So again, on a personal note, and as a theory of change, we don't talk about a lot of animal suffering. We didn't talk about all of that. It's still going to be inherently sustainable. It's still going to be better for planet. It's still going to be rooted in science in terms of water use, land use. There are hundreds of other benefits of using plants, even if it's cruel to plants. But I think it's still better to care for human species and their feeding problems for by 2050, right? You still got to feed 10 billion mouths, 1/6 of whom are going to be Indian. So I guess we just settle for a better choice until you get there. And then again, fermentation, there's air protein now. There's a company called Solar Foods, which makes protein directly from microbes and, CO2. So you don't even need plants in fermentation, meat, eggs, and dairy, which is why we need three different verticals, for exact these
Yeah, like
reasons.
we are learning these aspects in our sixth semester. We have like a subject which is known as industrial microbiology, industrial and environmental microbiology. So we like the bioreactor one slide. I like really liked it. We like basically use it for like microbial generations, and I was like fascinated to know that um, since that was scaffold preparation can also be done in those bioreactors. And yeah, like that that slide I find very fascinating. Shardul, you are on
Sorry, yeah.
mute.
Yeah, but long story short, if you, even if you keep pain aside for plants, which is again itself a very contested thing to discuss, the point is it's still going to be extremely more sustainable than, conventional
Mm.
animal meat, eggs, and dairy. So it's still a much, much, much better option for the world, for the planet, for health, for all of these things we talked about.
Okay, so next question. On what basis smart protein innovations are rated? Like for the companies that are coming up with the vegan version of their menus, like Domino's and everything. So, is there any substitutory body or anything like which regulates the is there any rating system or anything?
So you mean rating system in terms of quality of
Yeah,
products?
in terms of quality and everything, like the production and everything. Like, is there any body that takes it? takes care of everything.
Regulations
Yeah,
and inspections, taking care of
yeah,
the
yeah, sure.
safeguards
So
and everything.
obviously, all the regulatory framework that is applicable to food industry is applicable from FSCCI, like you all know. There's FSCCI labels and everything. So all of the plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy products are governed by FSCCI because ultimately these are food products. So it has to fall within that purview of FSCCI's definition of food laws, food safety, food standards, production methods, all of that, right? So obviously, FSCCI is the central body which does that. For cultivated, there are some additional regulations which maybe Akshay can talk about which bodies are involved with that.
Yeah, in terms of cultivated meat, I think it's very important to focus on various areas of genetic modification, right? So we have this gene editing, which is very critical, as well as genetic modification. So it's a very thin line. If you guys know what is genetic modification and how it is actually regulated by various scientific bodies in the country as well. So it's more trickier, and that's the reason why the space of cultivated meat it does take a very very long time in terms of incubation, not only in terms of science and technology, but how it's actually approved down the line, right? So Singapore is one of the countries which has actually approved this kind of meat, but they're basically known to be very fast. They are a very small country. Uh, they need to feed a lot of people with very little
Yeah,
resources they have. So I think that's more driven by pressure, but they actually are ultimately looking at the future and saying, okay, if things are not sustainable in countries around us, then maybe we'll be the first person. Sorry, we'll be the first country to maybe extinguish.
like many bioethics also come into play with respect to GMO crops or
Yeah.
genetically modified organisms
Yeah.
that come into
And the
play.
great thing is you don't have to use GMO at all to make all of these three verticals. It's not necessary. Some companies are trying GMO approaches as well. Sometimes, for example, impossible, right? It makes soy hemoglobin to replicate that bloody texture. A lot of you might have read in our resources. Soy hemoglobin is available in soy root nodules. And what you want to do is replicate animal blood. So you do that through those plants, but they use a genetically modified organism to process it, which is a microbe, but the end product is not GMO, right? So the
Mhm.
product is still approved and sold in market very, very through all USFDA, USDA, all of these bodies have approved these products. So just to tell you, not GMO has a very little bearing. It could be used, but India obviously it's not allowed. It's banned. So obviously in India, all of these three products, these three sectors would grow without any GMO interventions to making these products.
Okay.
Okay, so next question. What's the substitute of honey? Like not just as a sweetener, but something which has like more or less the same kind of nutritional value.
That is really out of our purview, honestly speaking. Like we don't work on honey. Like we haven't mentioned honey, so we can skip that question. It's plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, and I don't see how honey could figure in. Obviously, there are a lot of artificial sweeteners that people are using. It's a huge challenge to solve because consumers are moving towards less sugar, less salt. So definitely, there's a consumer demand for cleaner labels, and I think European companies, American companies,
So,
including
like
bigger
we are
giants.
discussing about policies. So, what kind of food policies should come into play or should come into the picture if we like want to really accept the smart protein sector in India? Like, what
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
remunerations or the things, the changes, amendments in the food policies we need to have?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. It's a very complex question as well. But think of it. In any given country, the government is the largest funder of open research
That's
for universities. At the same time, is the largest decision maker when it comes to setting up infrastructure, without which nothing can really move. No matter how many private players come in, no matter how many individual actors come in, unless the government really decides to, expedite the growth of the sector, it cannot really grow, which is why we work in an advisory capacity with a lot of different government departments as well. The answer to that is basically think about it. Like if some of you know about the Ministry of Food Processing Industries, right? It's setting up mega food parks across the country, like huge processing mega food parks, which would have a lot of infrastructure, food processing equipment, and it's also giving a lot of subsidies in cold chain of abattoirs and slaughterhouses. But we already know if we go down that route, we are actually promoting factory farming. We already know from past 50, 60 years that it has turned out to be really horrible in the US. And now they are trying to get away from that food system. So why would we invest in such policies? Rather than that, let's just put up extruders across all of these mega food parks rather than putting up slaughterhouses. You get my point, right? So it's basically all the research areas, the equipment areas, infrastructure areas for our sector. If we can basically pull up, and again, this is a huge neglected sector globally in terms of investment. uh, like Akshay said, the in millions of dollars are now flowing into it. It's rapidly exponentially growing up, but still compared to solar energy, it would be like 1%. Like the amount of money that goes into renewable energy, for example, not just solar, it's 1% of that, even lesser than that, that goes into our sector. So imagine the impact you could have. Like imagine when Elon Musk started SpaceX or Tesla. He's the richest man now, but back then his companies were going to fail because the ecosystem was not there to support electric cars or to support renewable sources of Solar City, that is his company. So again, I think a lot of these things change as people understand, policymakers understand the benefits of doing these things and not repeating the same mistakes of the West, or the same mistakes that other countries in the world have done. We have a great advantage here. The good thing is, because I said we do only 5% processing, we don't have the baggage. We haven't invested in these horrible, outdated food systems. So we can invest freshly in new areas of research, new innovative areas like plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy, fermentation-derived meat, eggs, and dairy, and then kind of use that to grow ahead. Again, private players are also very important. The earlier example I was actually going to give you of why we think there's a huge scope in India for manufacturing also. We are supplying vaccines to the entire world right now because of Serum Institute of India. A lot of you might know that, right? It's one of the largest vaccine manufacturers anywhere in the world, which is why we have taken such a big lead in manufacturing of vaccines. Think about the overlap between biotech, pharma industries, which we are really good at, and apply that to cultivated meat or fermentation meat derived products, because a lot of that infrastructure, bioreactors, stuff like that, the growth factors, a lot of them would have overlap, and we can easily transfer this into our field and still have a very big competitive advantage.
Yeah, as Sir mentioned in the chat box, Akshay Sir mentioned in the chat box, check on the difference between GMO and gene editing, like gene editing as in CRISPR and Cas9. Are we talking about that?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So can you like share some research papers for the young scientists here? Because I'm also interested in those kind of research papers. Recently, somebody got, I should remember the name perhaps, but somebody received the Nobel Prize for that
That's
gene
right.
editing.
So yeah, what I'll do is I'll share some reviews with you guys, maybe later on, because that will give you a more holistic perspective of how the field is actually emerging, or how was it before, or why people are preferring gene editing compared to genetically modified organisms, right? So that's something which is very important to understand, and why gene editing is the future of many sectors and areas, not only food sector, but also in pharmaceuticals and so many other different application areas. So definitely I'll share some insights on that.
So we began with the session with the simple question that there is a protein malnutrition problem in India. So like it starts from infancy, from birth as well, that the infants are also malnourished in proteins. So do we have any smart protein options as baby foods? Like everyone is thinking about
Yeah.
burgers and
No, absolutely.
for
There are
adults.
companies which I specifically focused on that. I'll leave you with one name, which is called BioMilk. It's one of the most innovative companies in this sector, and Akshay can tell you a little bit more about what they do, I guess. Akshay, would you be comfortable, or I can just give some general?
I'm sorry, I couldn't actually get the question. Can
BioMilk,
you?
So
yeah. So
we have
BioMilk.
like, do we have any baby food options in the smart protein sector? So Shardul said that there's a company known as BioMilk.
Yeah, so what BioMilk is actually doing is it's basically a US based company, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded company actually. So what these people are doing is, this lactating mothers sometimes face difficulty in terms
Hmm.
of generating milk. So what they're doing is actually using exactly what I was talking before, like, genetic modification, not really genetic modification, a little bit of gene editing and stuff like that, to actually synthesize those proteins outside the body of a mother, especially, let's say, in culture, and then raise it in, expand it or take it to an industrial scale and give the same kind of nutrition which babies require actually. So this is one
Like,
of the
do
biggest.
these have antibodies which are required for the infants
Yeah,
as
so
well?
that's a good question. That question has never been answered because I attended a couple of their sessions, and it's fair enough because they're still a very young startup company, right? So they are most probably figuring out how do they actually reach to that point. But I think it's also very important to understand here is, of course, be let's say biomilk is not able to give you a, let's say, holistic solution or complete solution, but I think focusing on the basic nutrition which the baby needs from the mother's milk, which is not available in normal cow's milk, because that's basically an alternative, right, for human
Obviously.
milk. Yeah, so that is actually if that is completely covered, I think the antibodies part can be think about later, because these babies would definitely survive with
Like the
this kind of
major
nutrition,
aspect
right?
that like the major aspects that need to be covered are like immunity and nutrition on the top, because that's an infant and that, like, little body has to grow a long way.
Yeah.
So I'll just we'll get into
Yeah.
research. We'll research more on Google after
Yeah,
Yeah.
this
in case of
session,
biomilk, it's
because
first
we have,
nutrition and second immunity. Immunity is
yeah.
still a conundrum. I mean, it's still not solved, but hopefully they'll come to some kind of a solution in that aspect.
And just to answer your question from a plant-based side of things as well, most of these products are high in protein, sometimes more protein than animal-based meat, and at the same time you reduce cholesterol, you increase fiber, you reduce trans fats, you increase complex carbohydrates, and fiber you cannot get from any animal sources, right? It's only
But
through
they
plants you
must
can.
be like requiring some essential proteins that are like not produced in the body, right?
Yeah,
So non-essential will be produced in the body that we don't need to like hire out of the body. But these things which are essential, that needs to be provided like from out of the body, like needs to be in the product.
yeah.
Well, let's not go to that product basics, but yeah, that's
But long
that.
story short, they're basically solving for essential amino acid
Yeah.
profiles. They are incorporating those in these plant-based meat products. Scientists are continuously thinking about adding more micronutrients into these products. Now, to simply tell you when we will see these products in India, it's going to be later on. Like there's a generation of product development, right? If you understand innovation and product development
Mm-hmm.
cycles, you start with a product and then you keep iterating it generation wise to improve it. And I think nutrition comes a little later because it's tough to do, solve for nutrition. You first solve for price, taste, and convenience. And those are things people anyway care for. Then you start getting more revenues in, you create a market, then you have some revenues to put into
Obviously,
R&D.
research and
Then you solve,
development, if
yeah,
huh.
then you solve for the nutrition problem, because you're not gonna get like a exactly same cost competitive product which tastes exactly the same, is also identical or better in nutrition right at the very first attempt. You start with one of these fundamental problems which most consumer care about anyways. Most consumers won't care about nutrition, though they may say they do. So most people won't look at labels, they just consume something because it's tasty. Most people still eat Maggie or Kurkure or whatever because it's tasty, right? Most of the food is consumed because it's tasty, it's an
Taste.
affordable price, and it's conveniently available. So that's the whole change theory of change. And then you obviously solve for nutrition. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And again, the answer depends when, 2 years or 10 years. It depends on how much money, resources, young talent like you decides on taking these challenges on and really solve for it. So yeah.
Okay, so
Absolutely, growth can be logarithmic, as correctly said by Akshay. So,
okay, shall I proceed?
yeah, Pratiksha.
Okay, so the next question: how does the smart protein industry attracts investors from India?
Yeah, so I've been involved. So I started in 2018 December. Since then, I've spoken to hundreds of investors in the past 2 years, 2.5 years. And basically, we've been educating all key investors in this space, agri-tech funds, people who care about nutrition, investors who care about impact investing, investors who care about sustainability, investors who care about animal welfare, investors who care about water use. Think of it like sometimes when you're trying to do renewable energy, you have only so many talking points about climate change. Here, you can talk about health effects, nutrition, climate change, water use, land use. So the scope to change is really immense. And I guess real change only comes from really innovative and fundamentally science led companies, which investors kind of realize. There are a lot of challenges for investing in this sector in India because lack of patient capital. So, an entrepreneur would need to purchase, it's a manufacturing business. It's not like an online IT startup, right? You have to think of this as a food manufacturing industry ultimately, which has a lot of capex. By capex, I mean capital expenditure, including fixed assets, equipment, machinery, plants, hiring a lot of scientists, stuff like that. For this, you require a lot of patient capital, as the venture capitalists call it. So, patient capital is something which facilitates the growth of these initial fixed assets, which is going to give you return over years, but not immediately. So, in immediate sense, there's a sunk cost. Somebody has to take that risk. That's the kind of culture which exists largely in Silicon Valley, but not yet much in India. So we are trying to educate a lot more people, and I guess globally investors are also going to invest, but also the local community is going berserk because they see this as a huge, huge opportunity to make a lot of profits. Like I said, Beyond Meat is one of the most successful initial public offerings in the stock market. Its stock price has grown it's grown like really, really rapidly. Now I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's I think trading at 10x. So it's generated a lot of value for investors. And similarly, a lot of companies have had good exits. They are getting $1 million of funding, and that's only because capitalists see potential in this. And I think compared to regular investors, I think venture capitalists see this sector as more preferable because venture capitalists are the ones who've built entire Silicon Valley, all of these high tech companies, likes of SoftBank. They understand scale. And because this sector is inherently rooted in economies of scale, they see this as a very interesting option to invest. And obviously, you're making the world a better place. You're making human lives much, much significantly better. So there's immense impact to have had compared to, so there's a counterfactual impact everywhere. There's always an opportunity cost. If you spend 100 rupees on buying ice cream, you're not spending that 100 rupees on doing anything else. Something similar is for investors. So they think of the most impactful opportunities sometimes to invest in, which is why this sector has attracted so much investment and will continue to attract some investment in India as well. Yeah. And somebody asked,
Okay.
like, how is GFI basically funded or receives investment? So we are funded completely through philanthropy. If you don't know what philanthropy is, just Google it. But basically, it's we get donations from $1 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on who's donating it. It could be say somebody who's listening to the webinar now who goes to our page and decides, hey, GFI is doing a great work. Let's donate them a couple of dollars. Or it could be somebody who understands, who's a very rich person, who's an investor, who understands that this sector is great. Let's just donate some money to GFI so that they can keep doing their work. So it's a non-profit organization funded through charity.
Okay, so next question: How does the sector promote sustainable food packaging? Like I've seen many brands. I won't name them because obviously we don't want to
Yeah, I lost Pratiksha, but I got her question. So think about straws. Everybody keeps talking about plastic straws. Everybody keeps talking about the impact you could have by making such simple nudges or switches. And that's a big problem because those interventions of smaller interventions, if you completely revamp entire packaging, which is not possible to do for obvious reasons, because biodegradable plastic, all of that is very, very problematic in the supply chain. Our country does not even have a steady supply chain of food. So there are a lot of problems throughout the value chain and supply chain for such packaging to exist. But even straws, like, it's such a very low impact intervention. And I love giving this example because instead of focusing on replacing plastic straws with more sustainable sources of straws, if you focus on just creating better products in the first place, including plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, which are 1,000 times more, it requires 99% lesser land. And I can quote you some statistics, but those are available in our resources that we shared. If you go through them, you'll see, so many less percent of land is required, so much less percent of water is required, so many much percentage less carbon emissions are there. So these are much, much more impactful interventions than thinking about plastic straws or plastic packaging and converting those, because you're already having so much impact. And with time, as the plastic packaging industry grows, like more and more companies, including the likes of Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, are now thinking about sustainable packaging. It's just a latest shift in how people consume, and I think those things will happen and keep those things will apply for our products as well, just like any other food industry product packaging. But fundamentally, we are not focused on packaging because we can focus on the products and do much more impact. Yeah. Tanya, maybe you can ask the next question since Pratiksha had to drop off. Does that make sense to Tanya? Like, Pratiksha's not here, but I hope that makes sense.
Tanya, you're on mute. I think she's talking to Pratik.
Am I
Yeah,
audible
my
now?
laptop.
Yes, you are. Go on.
Even my
Oh, I'm so
laptop
sorry.
got hanged, Pratiksha.
Okay, so I'll continue. So I was asking, like, how does the sector promote food packaging, sustainable food packaging?
Yeah, we
I've seen.
covered that. I think we can skip. I was just answering that question when you were dropped off.
Okay,
So
I'm
Yeah,
so
he
please
has
sorry.
continue.
answered.
Okay,
No,
so
it's okay.
I'll proceed. So, what are the internship and employment opportunities in this sector for freshers?
Yeah, for freshers, it's a bit tricky, because you don't have a lot of skill set to apply directly into the sector. But I think as the sector matures, there'll be more opportunity for freshers. Right now, I think there are much better opportunities if you spend a couple of years. Let's just say you understand food science or crop science, and you spend doing your master's research on crop optimization for high protein crops, indigenous crops. Then you have a great opportunity to kind of translate that research directly into collaborate with a startup and make it feasible or practical in the market. So not a lot of research done in this area would be just staying in those books or thesis documents which are never going to be looked by anyone. It's not useless research. It's a very practical industry where every single, and Akshay mentioned a lot of these fields. We have a research grants program. You can go on our website and look at all the research specific white papers and documents. But I do think that freshers have a lot of opportunity if they really develop skill set in specific areas of research, including new product development, biochemistry, protein
So, like, what kind
texturization.
of research internships can be offered through this
Sure.
sector?
So sector is all the areas we talked about, right? Every area
Like
has a problem
every
statement.
even its research, operations, logistics, anything
All
which
of
is
it.
related to this sector, all of it.
All of it, absolutely. Even we are in touch with IIMs, we are in touch with global business schools, consumer research, econometrics, life cycle analysis, unit economics, feasibility studies. All of those things can be applied to this sector and are needed. And for that, you have to understand the sector first, not just from a sci-tech angle, from all different lenses to really
Okay.
get it. Yeah, yeah. And
But sir,
again, like I
yeah.
think more opportunity. So when I was a student back in 2016, I was in my fourth year of food technology. I was trying to apply for a lot of research internships globally, like everybody does. I had developed a really nice profile, filed for a patent, written a couple of papers, got a book chapter. All of those things were in place to kind of apply for of these things. I did not end up getting a plant protein because, like I said, there were only a couple dozen companies back then. There are many, many more now, and half of my lab, which was at Rutgers University, is now working in the alternative protein sector. Similarly, similar trends are going to happen in India, where you graduate with a degree with some sort of expertise in all of these across the value chain from farm to table. And in cultivated, it's a little different than food science, right? You can be an expert on cell cultures, you can bring down the cost of media, you can work on growth factors, you can work on bioreactors. If you're a chemical engineer or a bioprocess engineer, you can work with microbes, all of those areas, as long as you identify a problem statement. And all of this is on our website, by the way. There are student guides which help you navigate through different problem statements. They tell you which universities are funding research. And the good thing is more and more money from the government. It's because it's the latest area of innovation, right? So a lot of innovation is being funded right now. A lot of master's programs, a lot of fellowships are being instituted globally. So there are a lot of foreign options, but also we'll be creating similar options in India as well at different universities. And obviously you can apply to some of these things directly from India, like the few startups that we are talking about, or the grant Akshay talked about at CCMB, or the Center of Excellence that's coming at ICT, would really help the local student to kind of get more opportunities in this area. Yeah.
So, adding to this, sir, I was asking that what about the students who are not from the science background? Like, suppose I am a designer. So, is the industry friendly to those people?
Absolutely, super friendly all the time. In fact, even at GFI India, we want graphic designers, which are good. But the point I was really trying to make is if you study this sector, if you understand brand positioning, if you understand the consumer research side, the market insight side, you can apply those knowledge, the soft skills, and probably make better graphics, better logos, better marketing material, better social media profiles, better digital marketing. All of those things could be done, and it's definitely not limited to anything. Lawyers, designers, commerce people, law people, everybody can find it's a growth of a sector. Like if IT sector grows, you're going to need lawyers who understand cyber law. It's something similar. Just like this sector grows, you're going to need graphic designers who understand specifics of marketing in this sector, who can create brand designs, labels, stuff like that, and can understand the brand language, who really understands the vision of that specific startup. And I think there's a huge demand. So for example, you can go through our global list of 600 companies that we've shared earlier. You look at all of their websites, you understand how their graphic designing works, and then there are 24, 30 startups in India. You contact them as an intern saying, hey, I can do this for you for free. If you like my work, I'll keep working with you. Just a simple way I'm telling you, how you can go on about doing these things as a graphic designer. Does that make sense,
Really?
Pratiksha?
Yes, sir, very much. And that's all. We are done with questions. Thank you so much.
If there are
Perfect.
any questions in the chat box, we can take that up, or if we have any solid questions from your side which were taken in the registration form, we can accept those as well.
No, I do
And then
think
we'll
we've covered almost everything through this exhaustive discussion of a lot of talking points. Long story short, we have not even covered 1% of what this sector is all about.
yeah,
And that's why the last 7 days, yeah,
I would like to send the feedback form through this. It will just take 2 minutes.
absolutely. Please
I'll
do.
share that. By that time, Pratiksha, you can start with the concluding speech.
Yeah, so I'll start with my vote of thanks. So I, Pratiksha, I am the project coordinator of Project Echo. On behalf of the Environment Club of DYAL Singh College, I would firstly like to extend my sincere gratitude towards our acting principal, Dr. V.K. Paliwal sir, and our teacher convener, Dr. Harleen Kaur Dabir ma'am. And this workshop is being conducted under the aegis of IQAC, and we are highly grateful to Good Food Institute India for collaborating with us. This insightful workshop wouldn't have been possible without your support and alliance. And I would also like to acknowledge the sincere efforts put in by the student organizing committee, which consists of Tanya Arora, the co-president of Environment Club, and Jayant, Asha, and I. We are the project coordinators. And last but not the least, you all, the participants. Thank you all for adding grace to the workshop, and the resources and the recordings will be accessible to you all even after this workshop. And also, if you wish to stay in the Google Classroom, you can. We are not removing those resources. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pratiksha and Tanya, for organizing this. Just on parting note, I have a couple of thoughts. Go to our website, go to gfi.org, go to gfi.org.in, go to smartproteinchallenge.com, go to smartproteinsummit.com, and just start reading up on all of this. I'm sure you'll kind of feel that there's this whole new world that you had never known in terms of career opportunities, in terms of the impact you could have in society. Right now, as students who are under 20, sometimes we don't consider a lot of these things. But trust me, when you start growing up, when you start thinking about your jobs, what real change you're having in society, is it going to satisfy you as a career? You consider a lot of other factors, while deciding on all of these areas. And maybe some of you go for PhD programs, some of you go for MBA, some of you go for masters. Always keep this sector at the back of your mind, and always know that no matter what you're choosing, you can always contribute, whether it's consumer research, whether it's marketing, whether it's strategy, whether it's finance, whether it's sciences, whether it's engineering. You're always in a capacity to kind of help accelerate the growth of the sector in India. And yeah, definitely stay in touch through our websites and go through all of our resources. I think the resources that are already shared, if you just keep going through them again and again, you'll learn 100 different things. And there's much more on our website, and we work with the open access philosophy. So none of our resources and none of our databases, none of our communities are ever going to be charged. They're always going to be free for everybody, and all our knowledge is also open access and free for all. So definitely happy to uh, you
Well,
know
can we remove the restrictions on mic and or video, so that we can have a little bit of testimonials from our and feedback, live feedback from our participants.
Yeah, yeah,
I
we
have
love
shared
that.
the I have shared the feedback form, guys. Please fill it out, and
And if you want to talk, just raise your hand. There's a feature here called raise hand. If you put your hand up, I'll just quickly make your audio and video on so that you can appear on screen and just let us know how the session was. We'd love to hear from you, whoever's attending. Great. I have Harshita here, and I'm gonna allow her to talk. And Harshita, maybe you can unmute yourself and talk.
Harshita, if you'd like to switch on your video, please do.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, video would not be possible, but I'll be asking only. Good evening, sir.
Sure, Harshita. Hi, good evening.
Sir, sir, I'm a law student, but still I joined this workshop to just
Hmm.
have basic insights about what can be done to make a better environment. Like non-vegetarian, earlier I used to hesitate that you kill the animals and it's very scary. But once I heard this concept that it is plant-based, like no animal would be killed, and it's really good. Like I'm a vegetarian, I would love to try this product once it's out in the market.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. Though these products are
Even we
not
are
meant for you,
delighted.
because if you don't like
Yeah,
eating meat, if you're repulsed by its taste, why would you really eat a plant-based meat, right? Technically, these are not meant for vegetarians, but there would be some people. Like India is a very complex country. It's not like USA that you're a flexitarian or you're vegetarian or you're a vegan. There are guilty non-vegetarians. There are Shravan. There are all these
yeah,
religious connotations. There are a lot of socio-economic and political factors. So it's going to be a very complex cohort. And definitely go to our YouTube channel. My colleague Dhruvi, she has a lot of rich insights on consumers and how they behave in India. Do look through it. But obviously, thank you so much for praising this sector, and we hope
you're
that more
welcome, sir.
products are going to be available for you.
Even we are delighted that we had like a diverse participation. Even students, teachers, even PhD students were here with
Hmm.
us
Wow.
in this 7-day workshop,
Right.
and it was like a good cohort that we had throughout the week. So if anyone else would like to give their testimonials
Yeah,
and
we'd love
give
to
their
hear from you
feedback.
guys how your experience was for the 7 days. If you learned something which you thought was very, very surprising, any fact, any tidbit, any trivia, all of those things are very, very welcome. And obviously, if you cannot think of anything, do stay in touch with our websites and consumer resources. And not everything we make is just, sci-tech papers and industry reports. We have brilliant podcasts, we have really good TED Talks, we have really good webinar videos which can help you with a lot of these things from the very basics. We have massive online open courseware. If you go to Coursera, not Coursera, it's on Canva Instructure. It's basically a MOOC which GFI USA runs, so you can do that, get started with the basics. And obviously the 7 day worth of resources that I've given are very, very exhaustive, so definitely do refer to that. And once again, thank you so much everybody for joining in. And thank you, Tanya and DAC, DU for organizing this, and Eco Club as well.
Haleen ma'am, would you like to say something?
I would just like to thank our panelists for devoting so much time for us and
Ma'am,
our
video
students.
on
Thank
करके.
you. Uh, Tanya, I'm doing other things also. So
Okay.
I'm logged in from outside. I'm not at home.
No worries, ma'am. Please let
Yeah.
us know.
So thank you, Shardul. Thank you, Akshay. Thanks a lot for coming to our workshop and giving us so much time and giving us so much information and joining our group and helping out our eco club team. And I'm hopeful that the entire young team is now prepared and will enthusiastically take this theme in future for research and development. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
we
ma'am.
wanted to like have a screenshot of all the participants together with their videos on.
That's
So,
going to be tricky because it's a webinar, right? And in webinars, I'll have to one by one convert everybody to panelists, which I can do really quickly. Not a problem. And we can just have it. Just give me 1 minute, okay, to do that.
okay.
So, more and more people will start joining in as panelists now. Hey, so all the attendees, I'm just going to make you panelists. So you will be logged out and logged in automatically. You don't need to do anything. If it asks you to join, just click on join. And then I think you'll be able to switch on your camera as well.
Everyone can please switch on their videos.
Yeah, nobody's judging. We all work from home, by the way. GFI India is currently working out of home. We gave up our Mumbai office. So all of us are at our homes all the time. And it'll be really a pleasure to see all of your faces and just know, associate your names with your faces so that later on, ever in life, if we meet, I'll kind of remember you.
Aden, Harshita, Jayant, Hardik, Kriti, Prerna, Anisha, Aparna, Anuj, Gulab. So
Akshay,
I
maybe
would
you can
like
also
to
help me
have
to.
a feedback from Dr. Dhanendra Kumar. He has been
Sure.
with us from a very long time. Sir, if you'd like to say a few words. Dhanendra, sir?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from Dr. Dharendra. Please let us know, Dr. Dharendra, how was your experience in consuming these resources in today's webinar session?
It's okay. Maybe there's an internet connection issue.
No
So,
worries.
yeah, we had a great time with all of you. Okay.
And whoever can
All the
switch on
best
the
for your
cameras,
future
please
endeavor.
do. You've taken the screenshot?
Yeah, I've taken screenshots.
Wait, people are still switching on their cameras. Take it again.
Yeah.
I think more people are coming into the screenshot and we can put it on LinkedIn. We'll promote, tag you guys if you are on LinkedIn. I think it's high time by the way, even as students, you start making LinkedIn accounts. I know all of you are on Instagram, but LinkedIn's the way to go from a career perspective. So please do that.
Well, yeah, we can have a separate session for like how to use LinkedIn for networking
Yeah.
opportunities. We will have that session as well. Environment Club can do anything. Great.
All right, great. So yeah, did you take it?
Yeah, I have taken.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for joining in. It was a pleasure. And stay in touch. Keep engaging with the resources. It's a very exciting field. A lot of celebrities. We didn't get a lot of time to talk. Usually, we do a 2.5 hours. Just look up all the biggest names. The guy who got Oscar last year. He's invested. What was his name again? Akshay, if you remember. Uh, the one in her. Joaquin Phoenix, right? I mean, a bunch of Hollywood celebrities, bunch of really high-profile investors, a lot of billionaires, a lot of influencers. Everybody's investing in the market. They're looking at this sector, so definitely, I think you'll find it interesting if you start looking into it. Yeah, great. Chalo, bye, guys. Take care. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Pratiksha. Thank you, Ali, ma'am. It was great talking to
Thank
you
you, Akshay
guys.
sir and Shardul.
Bye.
Bye bye.